When Nietzsche wrote those words in the late 19th century, he wasn't celebrating. He was observing. He saw that belief, which had once held Europe together, was breaking down under the weight of science, philosophy, and modern thought. More than a century later, the question remains, are we watching the end of religion itself? Everywhere you look, the signs seem to be there. In country after country, younger generations are walking away from organized faith. Churches close their doors, mosques and temples struggle to hold on to their youth, and religious leaders warn that belief is collapsing. In the United States, often seen as unusually devout for a wealthy country, the fastest growing group in surveys is none, people who say they have no religion at all. In parts of Europe, belief is already the minority position. Even in nations where religion once ruled every corner of life, the grip is loosening. But the end of religion is not just about numbers, it's about relevance. For most of human history, religion explained everything. Where we came from, why the sun rises, why illness strikes, why people die. Today, those answers come from science, medicine, and technology. Lightning isn't Zeus, it's electricity. Plague isn't punishment, it's microbes. The explanations that once made religion necessary are no longer convincing. That shift has profound consequences. Because when religion loses its monopoly on explanation, it also loses authority. If people don't need priests to tell them how the world works, why would they trust those same priests to tell them how they should live? The unraveling begins at the edges, then moves inward. This doesn't mean religion disappears overnight. Institutions built over centuries don't vanish in a decade, but their role changes. Instead of being the foundation of society, they become optional. Instead of shaping law and culture, they adapt to survive within them. And the more optional religion becomes, the more people see that life, morality, and meaning are possible without it. That realization is what frightens religious authorities most. Because it isn't just about numbers dropping, it's about belief itself becoming unnecessary. Once enough people live good, meaningful lives outside religion, the question shifts, not which faith is true, but do we need faith at all? We're seeing that shift in real time, and it raises the question this video is asking. Are we living through the end of religion? One of the most striking changes today is how openly people can live without religion. In the past, disbelief was often hidden. It could cost you your reputation, your safety, even your life. Today, in many parts of the world, people can identify as non-religious without facing those consequences. That freedom alone accelerates decline, because once doubt is visible, others realize they are not alone. There's a snowball effect here. 100 years ago, a young person questioning faith might have had no one around them who felt the same. Today, that same person can find entire communities online, discussions, podcasts, books, and even social groups built around life without religion. This visibility doesn't just normalize disbelief, it makes it an active alternative. Sociologists often point out that religion thrives where uncertainty and insecurity dominate. Poverty, illness, instability, these are conditions that fuel reliance on divine comfort. But as living conditions improve, people feel less dependent on sacred promises. Look at countries with strong social safety nets, high education, and universal healthcare. Rates of non-belief are consistently higher there. It's not that prosperity erases religion instantly, but it makes religion less essential for survival. This isn't new. If you look back, every major decline of religious authority has coincided with moments when human institutions took over roles once held by gods. In medieval Europe, the church explained disease as punishment. Then science revealed germs. In ancient societies, the gods explained rainfall. Today, we forecast it with meteorology. Every step forward shrinks the domain of the sacred. The difference now is speed. Technology spreads knowledge so quickly that entire generations shift in worldview in just a few decades. Another element is diversity. In a village where everyone shares the same belief, religion feels absolute. But in a globalized world, we encounter dozens of faiths daily. If your neighbor follows a different god, and your colleague follows none, it forces a question. Can they all be wrong except yours? That exposure is powerful. Religions fear relativism for this very reason. Once people see belief as cultural rather than universal, it loses its aura of necessity. There's also the matter of authority itself. Religious leaders once held immense power over governments, education, and morality. Today, those spheres are increasingly secular. Politicians may still use faith to rally voters, but policy in many countries is less tied to scripture. Schools in developed nations teach evolution, not creation myths. Courts are more likely to use human rights as a framework than divine law. This shift strips religion of its role as the final word. And here's where psychology enters the picture. Belief is often tied to cognitive biases. Humans are wired to see patterns, agency, and intention even where none exist. A rustle in the grass becomes a predator. A storm becomes a punishment. But the more we understand those instincts, the less they need divine explanation. Modern psychology doesn't eliminate belief, but it explains why belief arises. That makes religion look less like revelation and more like a human habit. And once seen as habit, it becomes easier to let go. We can also talk about morality. Religions claim to be the source of right and wrong. Yet in practice, societies are moving toward moral frameworks grounded in empathy, human rights, and evidence. Same-sex marriage, gender equality, animal welfare. These movements didn't grow from religious institutions, they grew in spite of them. As secular ethics expands, the idea that religion is needed for morality weakens. What's left, then, is mostly tradition. Religious holidays, rituals, cultural heritage. These remain important to many people, even when belief fades, and this is an important distinction. The decline of religion doesn't necessarily mean the decline of community or ritual. It means those elements can survive without supernatural claims. The difference is that they become chosen rather than mandatory. So, when we ask if we are watching the end of religion, part of the answer depends on what we mean by religion. If we mean institutions claiming divine authority, their power is shrinking. If we mean cultural practices, those may endure in new forms. But either way, the sacred monopoly on human— When institutions feel their influence slipping, they rarely let go quietly. Religion is no exception. Around the world, faith communities have been reinventing themselves, trying to adapt to modern life without losing their identity. Some have embraced technology, streaming sermons, building apps for prayer, or pushing religious content on social media. Others have shifted their tone, presenting themselves less as enforcers of rules and more as sources of comfort and belonging. This tells us something. Even religion knows that its old model doesn't hold the same power it once did. Fear of hellfire may have motivated past generations, but it resonates far less with younger people. Instead, leaders highlight spiritual wellness, personal growth, or family values. It's not hard to see that these are attempts to reframe faith in a way that doesn't clash so obviously with modern sensibilities. At the same time, there's been resistance. In some regions, declining belief has triggered a hardline response. More rigid doctrine, louder demands for laws to enforce religious norms, louder voices warning of moral collapse. This isn't growth, it's a defensive strategy, like a cornered animal tightening its grip as it senses control slipping. And paradoxically, these harsh tactics often backfire. Instead of pulling people back in, they drive them further away. The tension becomes clear when you look at education. In many countries, religious groups lobby aggressively to shape school curricula. They fight battles over evolution, sex education, and scientific topics that threaten their teachings. But every victory they win tends to be temporary. Information spreads too quickly, and once young people learn about alternative viewpoints, the monopoly collapses. This is why so much effort is spent on shielding children from exposure. It's the last stronghold. Another adaptation is interfaith cooperation. Institutions that once saw each other as rivals are now more willing to join forces, presenting a united front against secularization. This is revealing. It suggests that the true competition isn't other religions anymore. It's non-belief. When leaders who historically condemned one another now speak of shared values, it's because they recognize they're losing the cultural battle not to each other, but to the absence of religion altogether. There's also the rise of what's sometimes called cultural religion. People who attend services rarely don't follow strict rules, but still identify with a faith label. For some, it's family tradition, For others, it's a way to belong to a community without deep belief. This group may keep institutions afloat for a while, but it doesn't guarantee long-term survival. Because when faith becomes mostly symbolic, it's only a step away from fading altogether. One of the more interesting developments is how religions borrow from secular trends. Churches offering yoga classes, mosques promoting entrepreneurship workshops, temples hosting mindfulness events. These aren't traditional practices, they're responses to cultural demand. It's an acknowledgement that if religion doesn't align with people's lives, people won't align with religion. But the deeper issue is that none of these strategies address the core problem. The decline isn't about presentation, it's about credibility. If people no longer see Scripture as literal truth, no amount of rebranding can restore that authority. Leaders may soften language or modernize rituals, but the foundation remains fragile. Once doubt sets in, belief rarely returns to its old strength. And so what we see is less a transformation into something enduring and more a slow process of negotiation. Institutions shrinking, adjusting, trying to buy time. But time itself may not be on their side. Because as each generation grows up with less attachment to faith, the base erodes further. Even the most adaptive strategies can't reverse that trend. This brings us to a crucial point. The end of religion may not come with a dramatic collapse, but with a gradual fading. Not a war, but a quiet shift in priorities. Not temples burning, but temples turning into museums or community centers. The end doesn't have to mean destruction. It can mean irrelevance, and in a way that's even more telling. Because when something ends by becoming unnecessary, it shows that society has outgrown it. For most of human history, religion wasn't just about gods. It was about identity, belonging, and structure. It gave people a calendar, a code of behavior, an explanation for misfortune, and a sense of destiny. Without it, life felt chaotic. And in a world where survival depended on cooperation, shared belief kept communities together. That's why religion was so deeply intertwined with politics, law, and culture. It was never only about faith, it was a framework for living. But here's the turning point. The very things religion once supplied are now provided elsewhere. Law is managed by secular institutions. Identity can come from culture, nation, hobbies, or communities that have nothing to do with gods. Explanations for misfortune come from science and medicine. Even the calendar is no longer tied to festivals of saints or seasonal sacrifices. Once people see that these functions are replaceable, religion stops being the backbone of society and starts being just one option among many. Psychologically, religion filled a need for certainty. People crave explanations, even imperfect ones. A storm sent by an angry sky god is, at least, an explanation. But the human mind has changed in how it tolerates uncertainty. Education trains us to accept probability, to live with complexity, to recognize that not all questions have immediate answers. That makes religious certainty less appealing. A claim that pretends to answer everything now feels less like wisdom and more like oversimplification. There's also the emotional side. Religion once offered comfort in grief, hope in hardship, and meaning in suffering. Those needs haven't gone away. But people are finding them in new places: therapy, philosophy, art, literature, community groups, even in the pursuit of science itself. The story of the universe, discovered through physics and biology, can inspire awe every bit as powerful as a creation myth. It's not the same kind of comfort, but it's real, and it doesn't demand belief in the supernatural. Another reason religion felt indispensable was fear. Fear of punishment, fear of exclusion, fear of the unknown. As societies grow more pluralistic, those fears lose their grip. When you see your neighbor live a moral, meaningful life without worship, the threat of divine punishment feels hollow. When laws protect freedom of conscience, the fear of exclusion weakens. And when science explains the unknown, the fear itself shrinks. With each of these fears fading, the hold of religion loosens. So, are we watching the end of religion? The answer isn't simple. Religion will not vanish everywhere all at once. In some parts of the world, it will remain dominant for generations. In others, it will become a cultural memory rather than a living force. What we are witnessing, though, is the unraveling of its claim to universality. It is no longer the default. It is no longer unquestioned. It has become one option among many, and one that fewer people are choosing. And maybe that's the most significant shift. The end of religion doesn't mean the end of meaning or morality or belonging. It means those things are being built on foundations that don't require the supernatural. It means humans are learning to create purpose for themselves without outsourcing it to an invisible authority. In the long run, religion may survive as ritual, as heritage, as culture, but as a force that defines truth and dictates morality, its era is closing, and the world that follows won't be less meaningful because of it. It may, in fact, be more honest, more compassionate, and more free. As Ludwig Feuerbach once said, religion is the dream of the human mind, and like all dreams, it fades as the light of reality grows stronger.